please welcome Mr. Jeremiah Pauly.
You're welcome, sir. Thank you. The greatest lesson I ever learned came to me from my father, who said, if you're ever in the position to help someone, you should do it. Growing up in Ohio, my father taught me the importance of values, integrity, respect, and service. My father was the type of man that would give you the shirt right off his back. I have a lot of fond memories growing up in Ohio. I think one of my favorite is on Friday nights during football season, sitting in our high school stadium, the Massillon Tigers. That stadium seats a little over 17,000 people, and sellouts are really not uncommon. I remember some nights we would huddle underneath a blanket, sipping on cocoa. I don't know if you know it or not, but Ohio's not just known for its high school football. We've got some pretty good college teams, too. You guys got to laugh. I gave that joke in Michigan. They loved it. Come on. My father also taught me about the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States of America. And he taught me about these brave men and women who fought, defended, and sometimes died for the rights and freedoms that we have as Americans. To say that I grew up in a patriotic family would be an understatement. But the flag was always flying high at our home. When I was 17 years old, I started thinking about what I wanted to do when I graduated. And the guidance counselor, she sat me down in the library and put a bunch of pamphlets in front of me, and she said, here, figure it out. And as I sat there looking through all these pamphlets, one stood out to me. On the cover was a soldier rappelling down a tower, and the caption read, "A year from now, you'll wonder why it looks so hard." Inside, I read how the Army would pay for my college, and I got excited. I ran home and ran into the house, and I screamed, Dad, Dad, I figured it out. I know what I'm going to do when I graduate. I said, I'm going to join the Army. My dad, he just looked at me like what I'm sure any caring father would, and he said, did you tell your mother? I said, Dad, the Army recruiter's coming over tonight. He said, you know, your mom's not going to be very happy about that. See, my mom grew up in a different time. Her brother served in Vietnam. And his welcome home, well, it wasn't a pleasant one. I sat there in the living room that evening, and the Army recruiter told me everything the Army was going to do for me. When he had finished speaking, he looked me right in the face and he said, what questions do you have? Before I could answer, my mom stood up and said, you can leave my house now. I never saw that guy again. My mom said, you're going to go to college, end of discussion. Well, at 17 years old, I needed my parents' permission to join the Army. So off to college I went. I went to the University of Akron with a desire to study business. I joined a fraternity. I might have partied a little too hard. I got put on this program, maybe you've heard of it. It's called academic probation. Maybe it was just a pilot program for me, I don't know. But I started thinking about what I was going to do now. And the thought popped into my head, I was going to join the Army. So I called one of my friends. I said, hey, Chris, I'm thinking about joining the Army, man. What do you think I should do? He said, oh, if you join the Army, you got to go infantry. And I said, oh, yeah, I know the infantry. That's like camping in the woods, like the Boy Scouts, right? He said, oh, yeah. Only you get to carry a gun. I was like, that sounds really cool. I called another friend. I said, hey, Jason, I'm thinking about joining the Army. What do you think I should do? He said, oh, man, you got to go airborne. I said, what's that mean? He goes, the Army will pay you to jump out of airplanes, and they're going to give you a little extra money for it. And the topper, you get to wear a maroon beret, and the ladies love it. Turns out that last part wasn't very true. But I walked into another Army recruiting office, and I said, I'm ready to join. I want to be airborne infantry. They just looked at me and said, okay. So off to the military entrance processing station in Cleveland, Ohio, I went. I took all the tests, the aptitude, the sight, the hearing, and I signed a contract to join the Army for 5 months later. And at 20 years old, the hardest thing I had to do was go home and tell my mommy I joined the Army. I said, Mom, I'm only trying to do what you and Dad have told me so many times, to serve others. She said, I understand what you're doing. I'm not sure that I support it, but good luck. So out to Fort Benning, Georgia, I went for basic training, advanced infantry training, and airborne school. A few months later, I arrived at my first duty station at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, home of the 82nd Airborne Division. Where I met what I believe are some of the finest leaders the Army has ever produced. They trained me, mentored me, taught me how to become the very best version of myself. And some of them on their chest, they wore a combat infantry badge. Some had seen action in Desert Storm, some in Panama, some in Grenada. Some were still serving from Vietnam. And how I admired those men. And I thought to myself, one day, I will lead soldiers into combat for my country. That became my dream job. Well, in January 2006, I found myself living my dream job. I was a squad leader assigned to the 1st Armored Division. In our platoon, we lived in an Iraqi house in the city of Talafar. The living conditions were not very good. We didn't even have any running water. And hot meals were something we were very happy to get. On April 8th, 2006, we were on patrol through the city. I'd sent one of my teams into a house to clear it and conduct a search. We were looking for enemy weapons caches. And I made the decision to go inside to help. Now picture, if you will, a house in the city of Talafar. They all have a walled-off courtyard in front of them. And as I stood there in that courtyard, I can remember thinking, how lucky am I that I get to serve my country? How lucky am I that I get to wear the uniform of the United States Army, surrounded by men that would gladly give their life for me, and I would gladly give my life for them. I can't wait to go home and tell my dad all about my experiences here. I hope that he's proud of me. Seconds later, one of my soldiers came up and said, hey, Sergeant, the house is clear. We didn't find anything. So I gave the signal for everybody to go back outside. And as a good leader, I stood there and took accountability of all my soldiers. And a thought popped into my head once again, how lucky am I that I get to serve my country? I love putting on the uniform every day. As I turned and I walked away, boom! The roadside bomb exploded with the loudest noise I'd ever heard. Just imagine if you were there. The dust so thick in the air you could cut it with a knife. Your ears would be ringing. A metallic taste in your mouth. And a smell of sulfur in your nose. Yelling at myself, get your hand on your weapon, get your hand on your weapon. I looked down, but my right arm was just hanging there, not responding. And there was blood all over my uniform, on my boots, and the ground. I stepped backwards and I cried out, Doc, Doc! Seconds later, our medic and a few of my soldiers rushed in. They began applying a bandage to my mangled right arm. 30 minutes had passed, and off in the distance, I could hear a helicopter. I was placed onto a stretcher and carried outside. And that's when I heard the words that will ring in my ears forever. Missildine is dead. Private First Class Jody Wayne Missildine was 19 years old. He had been in the Army less than a year, and he was one of my soldiers. He was one of the men that I had promised that I would help protect. But at that moment, I thought his death was all my fault. Every day, I wear this bracelet that bears his name, and I never take it off. I do this to honor his memory, for his family, and to serve as a constant reminder to me to always live. But the truth is, that day I became a statistic. I became one of the estimated 400,000 returning veterans from the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan suffering with one of the unseen wounds of war, post-traumatic stress. Through surgeries and therapies, I learned how to adapt to my physical wounds. But it was the mental and emotional that truly hurt the worst. And in 2007, I would be told that I'm no longer physically fit to serve my country. And I was devastated. But little did I know that that's when my real problems would begin. J.K. Rowling once said, "Rock bottom is the solid foundation on which I rebuilt my life." I hit rock bottom pretty hard. 3 days after I left the Army, my dad died. He never got to hear this story. 6 months later, my grandmother died of cancer. I was trying to heal from what I had been through, but much like my arm hanging limp that day, my mind wasn't responding. And I turned into a very angry, nasty, bitter person. My terrible, selfish behavior, it led to an eventual divorce. When I was out job hunting, I would tell someone that I served in Iraq and that's where I was wounded. And I'd often be replied to with, "Well, you don't look wounded." And I wish that I was wounded even more. I'd often look down at my bracelet looking for answers that never came. I thought Jody got the better end of the deal. At least he wasn't around to suffer anymore. One night I came home from work and I sat down on the couch and I noticed that I was all alone. And I started thinking to myself, what am I going to do now? A thought popped into my head. I got up off my couch, I walked down my hallway, reached into my closet, pulled out my Glock, put it to my head, and I pulled the trigger. I was going to take my own life. I was going to be with my friend. But before I did, I wanted to go out and celebrate. I went out that night with the only person that wanted to be around me. And I got into a lot of trouble. So much trouble that I'm ashamed to tell you what happened. When I finally got home the next day, I went straight to sleep. And this is where I promise where the story gets better. I woke that afternoon, there was a voicemail on my phone. It said, "Jeremiah, this is Megan from Wounded Warrior Project. I need you to give me a call." I had no idea who Megan was. And at that time in 2011, Wounded Warrior Project was not nearly as big as and impactful as we are now. But I called Megan back, and our conversation was friendly, like we had known each other for years. She said, "I want to send you to an event called Soldier Ride." Soldier Ride is a unique 4-day cycling opportunity where we bring wounded veterans together from across the country and we ride bicycles, regardless of the injuries that we have. I said, "Megan, that sounds amazing. Where is this Soldier Ride?" She said, "It's in Phoenix, Arizona." I thought it was pretty funny. Wounded Warrior Project wanted to send me to the desert. Yeah, last time I was in the desert, bad things happened. But I reluctantly agreed to go, knowing that something in my life needed to change. When I arrived in Phoenix, I was greeted by some of the most passionate people who work for this organization, who truly embody our mission, which is to honor and empower wounded warriors. That weekend, I learned about the logo of Wounded Warrior Project. One warrior carrying another warrior moving forward. I was physically carried off the battlefield years ago in Iraq, but Wounded Warrior Project picked me up and brought me home emotionally. I was the warrior on top of our logo. I now have the incredible opportunity to be the warrior on the bottom of our logo, to reach out and help bring my fellow brothers and sisters home. We call it Living the Logo. Wounded Warrior Project empowered me, much like those leaders I met at Fort Bragg, to become the best version of myself. Wounded Warrior Project showed me that I don't have to wear the uniform of the United States Army to serve, that I can do it now, at home, in my own communities. Wounded Warrior Project saved my life. They gave my children their father back. I have 2 kids. My daughter Grace just turned 13. My son Jacob will be 10 in a few weeks. Both beautiful little redheads, and we have a lot of fun together. One of my favorite memories was sitting at lunch with them one day talking about all the fun stuff that we did or what we want to do throughout the day. And my little girl looks up at me and she says, "Dad, God made a lot of things." And I said, "Yeah, that's right, baby." She never took her big blue eyes off of me and she said, "But everything else is made in China." I can't wait to tell her about this conference. I now know that I have a very important responsibility to live my life for my brothers and sisters that didn't make it home, to teach others the value of service. Wounded Warrior Project wouldn't be where we are today without some amazing partnerships like the Wahl Clipper Corporation. Wahl Clipper Corporation, you are the warrior on the bottom of the logo. Because of your generosity and your support, you are helping save the lives of my brothers and sisters. And ladies and gentlemen, if you only remember one thing that I say tonight, I want it to be this. In honor of my father, and in memory of my brothers and sisters that did not get to come home, if you are ever in the position to help someone, you should do it. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Right now, I'd like to welcome my friends from the Wahl Clipper Corporation. Please give them a big round of applause.
Hi, my name is Steve Eady. I'm the Vice President of Marketing for Wahl Clipper. What an amazing man, an amazing organization. This is a Made in America show, and we're proud to be part of a Made in America show. And I just want to tell you a little story about Wahl Clipper. Next week, we celebrate our 100th anniversary. And thank you. And it's still family run. The fourth generation just took over actually about a month and a half, 2 months ago. Brian Wahl would love to be here, but he's actually in Germany right now on some business. But I just got to tell you a story about his dad, Greg Wahl, who just stepped down as CEO. I started 15 years ago next month at Wahl Clipper. And when I got hired on the first day, I got called down to the CEO's office. And I'm like, wow, this is pretty amazing. I'm going to go down and see the CEO. So I walk down there. I come in. Greg's wearing a plaid shirt and jeans like he did every single day. He's an engineer by heart. And he said, Steve, come sit down. I want to talk to you. I said, okay. He says, I want you to remember you have two responsibilities here at Wahl Clipper. And I said, well, what's that? And he says, well, you need to increase sales and profit. I said, okay, I can do that. He goes, no, that's just the first one. I said, well, what's the second one? He says, I want you to make sure that you ensure that people in Sterling, Illinois have a job. We have 1,200 people back in Sterling, Illinois making clippers and trimmers for 100 years next week. So we're pretty excited to be part of this, and we're excited to be part of Wounded Warriors. And I'd like to bring out two people here. Bruce Kramer, he's the Senior Vice President of North America, and Phil Wahl, fourth generation Wahl family member. Please welcome them.
Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Like Steve mentioned, my name is Phil Wahl. I'm fourth generation family member for Wahl Clipper Corporation based out of Sterling, Illinois. And it's just a real privilege to be here at the first USA Made Manufacturing Facility Conference. So it's a pleasure to be here. And with that, we would like to make a donation of $75,000 to the Wounded Warrior Project.
I asked Steve and Phil if they'd mind if I just took maybe 60 seconds to say just a few words. The biggest two words I want to say is just thank you. Thank you to all the veterans. Thank you to all the wounded warriors. Thank you to all the families who have been touched by some of the ravages of war. Last night, we all had the fun of being at the concert last night, which really was a hoot. But we were all struck, and we were talking about something that we heard Zach Brown say up here on stage that we'd never quite thought of before. Zach made a point to say, you know, when you see somebody who's been in the service and you see a veteran and you say, well, how can we repay you for your service? He said, you can't. We will never answer that question because there's no way to repay something that's already been done. And so we're here not to try to repay that, but just to say thank you on behalf of Wahl Clipper and the 1,200 people working in Sterling, Illinois. Thank you. Thank you to all the veterans. Thank you to all the service people for all the sacrifices you have made. And this is just not a payment, but just a small token of our appreciation. Thank you all for what you do.